The massive observation deck of the Earth diplomatic vessel Harmony offered an unobstructed view of the Centauri homeworld, Avalon. Commander Sarah Chen stood at attention, her decorated uniform pristine, as she watched the swirling purple clouds part to reveal glimpses of the crystalline cities below. After 15 years of interstellar tensions, this was humanity's first official diplomatic mission to the Centauri Alliance. The Centauri were an ancient species, having achieved space travel while humans were still learning to craft bronze tools. Their towering forms, averaging 4 meters in height, and their crystalline-based biology, made them as alien as any species humanity had encountered. But it was their rigid social hierarchy and complex honor system that had caused the most friction during first contact. "Commander Chen, they're ready for us," Lieutenant Marcus Rodriguez announced from behind her. She turned to face her diplomatic security team, 6 of Earth's finest officers chosen specifically for this mission. They all understood the stakes. One wrong move could reignite the conflicts that had nearly led to war 5 years ago. "Remember your training," Sarah addressed her team. "The Centauri value precision and grace above all else. No sudden movements, no direct eye contact unless invited, and maintain exactly 1 arm's length of distance at all times." The journey through the Centauri Diplomatic Center was a lesson in architectural grandeur. Massive archways of living crystal pulsed with bioluminescent light, while gravity-defying fountains created impossible patterns in the air. Their Centauri escort, Administrator Valthorin, moved with the fluid grace characteristic of their species, crystal fragments in their skin catching and refracting the light with each step. The diplomatic chamber itself was a marvel of engineering. The circular room featured a series of crystalline platforms that adjusted their height automatically to allow the much shorter humans to meet the Centauri at eye level, a gesture of respect that hadn't gone unnoticed by Sarah's team. High Chancellor Mirkera, the leader of the Centauri Alliance, entered with an entourage of advisors. At nearly 5 meters tall, with intricate patterns of crystal growths forming what humans had learned to recognize as symbols of high rank, the Chancellor was an imposing figure. "Commander Chen," the Chancellor's voice resonated through the chamber, translated perfectly by the neural interfaces both species had agreed to use. "Your reputation precedes you. Your handling of the Proxima incident showed both wisdom and restraint." Sarah bowed precisely to the depth protocol demanded. "You honor us with your welcome, High Chancellor. Earth extends its gratitude for this opportunity to strengthen the bonds between our peoples." The formal greetings continued, each word and gesture carefully chosen. But Sarah noticed something unexpected. A younger Centauri among the Chancellor's advisors, watching the proceedings with what seemed to be genuine curiosity, rather than the usual careful neutrality. This was Corvalin. She would later learn, a prodigy in Centauri xenobiology, who had argued passionately for closer cooperation with humans. His presence here was no accident, just as Sarah's selection as commander had been carefully calculated. Both sides were quietly positioning those who sought understanding rather than division. The negotiations began in earnest, discussing everything from trade routes to cultural exchange programs. Sarah noticed how the Centauri seemed particularly interested in human art and music, concepts that their logical, crystalline minds found fascinatingly chaotic yet structured. Hours into the talks, alarms suddenly blared throughout the diplomatic center. A security breach, but not what anyone expected. A damaged research vessel, one of the independent human mining operations that worked the outer reaches of the system, was on a collision course with the capital city's shields. Without hesitation, Sarah stepped forward. "High Chancellor, we have experience with this class of vessel. Allow us to assist your rescue operations. We can prove that our peoples can work together in crisis as well as in peace." There was a moment of tense silence as the Chancellor considered this offer. Sarah held her breath, knowing that this moment could either bridge the gap between their species or widen it irreparably. The Chancellor's crystal formations shifted color slightly, what Sarah had learned to recognize as their equivalent of a thoughtful expression. Your offer is accepted, Commander Chen. Corvalin will coordinate with your team. Show us how humans handle a crisis. What followed was a masterclass in cooperation. Human ingenuity and quick thinking complemented Centauri precision and advanced technology. Sarah's team worked seamlessly with Corvalin's, their different approaches creating solutions neither side would have developed alone. The rescue was successful, saving not only the human crew but also preventing any damage to the city. More importantly, it showed both species what they could accomplish together. As the crisis wound down, Sarah found herself working directly with Corvalin, explaining human emergency protocols while he shared insights about Centauri crisis response methods. Your species adapts quickly, Corvalin observed, his crystal patterns shifting in what Sarah had begun to recognize as excitement. We planned for 17 contingencies, but your team created 4 new approaches in the moment. And your species' precision made those adaptations possible, Sarah replied. We would have had to try dozens of variations without your calculations. The High Chancellor watched this exchange with interest. Perhaps, Sarah thought, this was the true success of the day. Not the formal negotiations, but this moment of genuine cooperation and mutual appreciation. As the diplomatic team prepared to return to their quarters for the day, Sarah felt cautiously optimistic. The real work was just beginning, but they had laid a foundation of respect and understanding. In the observation lounge that evening, she watched the crystalline cities below shimmer with newfound meaning. They were no longer just alien architecture, but symbols of the bridges they were beginning to build. Lieutenant Rodriguez joined her at the window. Quite a first day, Commander. Sarah nodded, her reflection ghosting against the backdrop of Avalon's purple sky. This is just the beginning, Marcus. We've shown them humanity's potential today, not through words, but through actions. That's worth more than 1,000 diplomatic speeches. As if in response, the crystalline spires of the city below pulsed with light, sending patterns of color racing through the structures like neural pathways, through a vast, living organism. Sarah made a mental note to ask Corvalin about the significance of these patterns tomorrow. After all, understanding began with curiosity, and humanity had that in abundance. 2 weeks into the diplomatic mission, Commander Sarah Chen found herself in the Centauri Institute of Senescence, a vast complex of interconnected crystal chambers where research into other species was conducted. The environment itself seemed alive, with walls that shifted and reformed based on the needs of its occupants. Today, she was here to review Corvalin's proposal for a joint human-Centauri research initiative. The young Centauri scientist's enthusiasm was evident in the rapid color changes rippling through his crystalline structures as he guided Sarah through holographic displays of his research. Your species' ability to think laterally, to make unexpected connections, could revolutionize our understanding of xenobiology, he explained, manipulating the complex 3-dimensional models with graceful movements. Sarah studied the data streams with careful attention. After the successful crisis response during their first day, the High Chancellor had appointed her as the human liaison for scientific cooperation. It was an opportunity she hadn't expected, but one that could strengthen the bonds between their peoples. What fascinates me, she responded, is how your crystalline biology allows for direct energy conversion. If we could adapt some of these principles to our technology, it could solve many of our energy distribution challenges. Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of elder scientist Exeritalia, one of the more conservative members of the Centauri Science Council. The elder's crystal formations were arranged in rigid traditional patterns that spoke of centuries of adherence to established protocols. Commander Chen, Exertalia's translated voice carried tones of careful neutrality. I trust you find our facilities adequate for your species' needs. Sarah recognized the subtle challenge in the question. Despite the successful first contact, there were still those among the Centauri who viewed humans as primitive upstarts. More than adequate, elder scientist. In fact, Corvalin, and I were just discussing how human intuitive problem-solving might complement Centauri's systematic analysis. Corvalin quickly brought up a new holographic display. Elder, please observe this simulation. We've combined human pattern recognition algorithms with our quantum crystalline computing. The results are remarkable. The simulation showed a complex molecular structure rotating in the air between them. It was a hybrid creation, part organic, part crystalline, that could potentially serve as an interface between human and Centauri technology. The implications were enormous. As Urtelia's crystal patterns shifted slightly, betraying interest despite the Elder's reserved demeanor. This is unexpected. The integration patterns are unlike anything in our databases, because we stopped trying to force human and Centauri approaches to conform to each other, Sarah explained. Instead, we looked for ways they could complement each other. Different doesn't have to mean incompatible. The Elder spent several minutes studying the data in silence. Finally, the ancient Centauri's crystals pulsed with what Sarah had learned to recognize as reluctant approval. Continue your research. The Council will be interested in your progress. After Urtelia departed, Corvalin's colors shifted to patterns of relief and excitement. That went better than expected. The Elder rarely approves new research directions so quickly. Sarah smiled. Sometimes the best way to overcome prejudice is to show results that can't be ignored. Now, tell me more about these integration patterns. I have some ideas about possible applications in space navigation. Over the next several days, word of their breakthroughs spread through both the Centauri scientific community and the human diplomatic mission. Lieutenant Rodriguez reported increased openness from his Centauri security counterparts, while other human specialists found their hosts more willing to engage in substantive discussions. However, not everyone was pleased with the rapid pace of cooperation. Sarah received reports of concerned murmurs from both sides. Some humans worried about sharing too much technology too quickly, while conservative Centauri factions warned about the dangers of rapid change to their carefully ordered society. The situation came to a head during a joint presentation to the Science Council. As Sarah and Corvalin demonstrated their latest results, Council member Derkathos rose to object. This goes too far. The Council members' crystals flashed with agitation. We are allowing humans access to technological principles that took us millennia to develop. Their species still fights wars among themselves. How can we trust them with such knowledge? Before Corvalin could respond, Sarah stepped forward. Council member, with respect, consider this. Despite our shorter history, humans have repeatedly shown the ability to learn from our mistakes and grow. Yes, we still have conflicts, but we also have something unique: the ability to change and adapt rapidly while holding on to our core values. She gestured to the holographic display. This research proves that our differences can be our greatest strength. Centauri precision and experience, combined with human creativity and adaptability, has already produced results that neither of our species could have achieved alone. The chamber fell silent as her words hung in the air. Even Derkathos seemed taken aback by her directness, a very human trait that would have been considered rude in Centauri culture not long ago. High Chancellor Mirkara, who had been observing silently, now rose to speak. Commander Chen speaks with wisdom that belies her species' youth. Perhaps that is precisely why this cooperation is so valuable. We have much to teach humans, yes, but also much to learn from them. The Chancellor's support effectively ended the debate, but Sarah knew the underlying concerns wouldn't disappear so easily. Later that evening, she met with Corvalin in one of the crystal gardens that dotted the diplomatic complex. Your defense of our work was passionate, he observed, his crystals shimmering in the dying light of Avalon's sun. Some would say too passionate for Centauri sensibilities. Sarah watched the living crystals around them pulse with bioluminescent light. Sometimes passion is exactly what's needed. Your people value logic and precision, and rightly so. But humans have learned that progress often requires someone willing to speak up, to challenge the established order. Like a catalyst in a chemical reaction, Corvellin mused, his scientific mind finding the perfect analogy. Introducing energy to break old bonds so new ones can form. Exactly, Sarah agreed. And speaking of new bonds, I've been thinking about applying our hybrid technology to deep space exploration. Both our species have encountered strange phenomena in unexplored regions. Working together, we might be able to understand them better. As they discussed the possibilities, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come in just a few weeks. The initial barrier of alienness had given way to genuine intellectual exchange and growing mutual respect. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that their progress was about to be tested in ways neither species could anticipate. In the growing darkness, the crystal gardens began their nightly luminescence display, casting intricate patterns of light and shadow. Somewhere in the capital city below, both humans and Centauri were ending their day's work, perhaps a little less suspicious of each other than they had been that morning. It wasn't dramatic progress, but it was real. Tomorrow we'll present our deep space exploration proposal, Corvellin said, his crystals glowing with what Sarah now recognized as optimism. It will be controversial. Good, Sarah replied with a smile. Controversy means we're pushing boundaries, and pushing boundaries is what both our species do best, just in different ways. As they parted ways for the evening, neither could know that their next challenge would come not from political opposition or cultural differences, but from the depths of space itself. A challenge that would test not just their scientific collaboration, but the very foundation of trust they had worked so hard to build. The anomaly appeared without warning. One moment, the space around Avalon was clear. The next, sensors detected a massive distortion in the fabric of space-time itself. Commander Sarah Chen was awakened by the emergency alerts flooding her neural interface, the urgent messages overlapping in her vision as she rushed to the diplomatic center's command hub. The massive crystalline chamber had transformed into a crisis center, its walls now displaying real-time data streams from every sensor in the Centauri Defense Network. High Chancellor Mirkera and the Science Council were already present, their crystal formations pulsing with patterns Sarah had never seen before, patterns that spoke of deep concern. It's unlike anything in our records, Corvellin explained, manipulating the holographic display to show the anomaly structure. The distortion is growing exponentially, and it's affecting both normal space and the crystalline matrices that form the foundation of our cities. Sarah studied the data, her mind racing. The anomaly was emitting waves of exotic particles that seemed to resonate specifically with the Centauri's crystalline biology. Already, reports were coming in of citizens experiencing disorientation and pain as their crystal structures vibrated in response to the waves. Our shields aren't designed for this type of phenomenon, elder scientist Exa Ertalia announced, her usual composure fractured by urgency. They're being penetrated as if they don't exist. Lieutenant Rodriguez burst into the chamber, his face grave. Commander, we're receiving reports from the human quarter. Our people are feeling effects too. Not as severe as the Centauri, but there's something about these waves that's affecting organic neural pathways. Sarah turned to the High Chancellor. We need to evacuate the population to the far side of the planet, away from the anomaly's strongest effects. Impossible. Darkathos interrupted, his crystals flashing with agitation. Our cities are living structures, interconnected with our people. We cannot simply abandon them. The crystal matrices would begin to decay within hours without our presence to maintain them. The situation was deteriorating rapidly. The anomaly had doubled in size during their brief discussion, and the first reports of structural damage to the outer crystalline spires were coming in. Sarah watched as the Centauri leaders debated options according to their protocols, each solution more impossible than the last. Then she noticed something in the data stream, a pattern that reminded her of something from Earth's history. The resonance, she said suddenly, drawing everyone's attention. It's similar to what happens when crystal glasses shatter from sound waves, but in reverse. Corvellin's crystals pulsed with sudden understanding. Of course, we could use our own crystalline technology to generate a counter-resonance. But that would require redirecting power from our defensive systems, HFY objected. We would be completely vulnerable. Not if we combine it with human shielding technology, Sarah countered. Our shields operate on different principles. They're not as advanced as yours, but they're also not affected by the anomaly. We could protect your cities while you generate the counter-resonance. The High Chancellor's crystal formations shifted through complex patterns as they considered the proposal. The coordination required would be unprecedented. One miscalculation could destroy both the shields and our cities. Then we don't calculate, Sarah said firmly. We adapt. Human shield operators working directly with Centauri crystal engineers, adjusting in real time. It's risky, but it's better than watching both our peoples suffer while we search for a perfect solution. A tense silence filled the chamber. The Centauri valued precision and careful planning above all else. What Sarah was proposing went against millennia of their cultural programming. But as another wave of pain swept through the population, the High Chancellor made their decision. Proceed, they commanded. Corvalin, coordinate with Commander Chen. All crystal engineers report to your assigned sectors. Council Member Dirkathos, oversee the power redistribution. What followed was organized chaos by Centauri standards and a miracle of cooperation by human ones. Sarah deployed her security team to coordinate with Centauri engineers, their human adaptability complementing the Centauri's precise control of their living technology. The Harmony shield generators were modified and synchronized with crystal resonance patterns in a procedure that would have taken months of testing under normal circumstances. As the anomaly reached its peak, human shield operators worked side by side with Centauri engineers, making split-second adjustments based on intuition as much as data. The strain on both the equipment and the operators was enormous, but they held. Corvalin and Sarah coordinated from the central control chamber, their earlier research into human-Centauri technological integration proving invaluable. When a power surge threatened to overwhelm the shields in Sector 7, it was Corvalin's understanding of human improvisational techniques that allowed them to reroute power through secondary systems, something that would have been considered dangerously imprecise by Centauri standards. Hours passed in a blur of emergency responses and constant adjustments. The combined shield network flickered but held, protecting the crystal cities while their inhabitants generated the counter-resonance needed to neutralize the anomaly's effects. Slowly, the distortion began to shrink. Energy patterns are stabilizing, Corvalin announced, his crystals dimmed with exhaustion but pulsing with hope. The anomaly is collapsing in on itself. Sarah watched the holographic display as the crisis that had threatened both their peoples gradually dissipated. The cost had been high. Several crystal spires had cracked under the strain, and both human and Centauri emergency teams were exhausted. But they had succeeded, and more importantly, they had done it together. In the aftermath, as mixed teams of humans and Centauri assessed the damage and began repairs, Sarah found herself once again in the crystal gardens with Corvalin. The garden's usual luminescence was dimmed, many of its crystals still recovering from the anomaly's effects. Our conservative factions are struggling to process what happened, Corvalin admitted. We survived by breaking nearly every protocol we have about precise, controlled responses to crisis situations. Sarah watched a repair team in the distance, human engineers working with Centauri crystal shapers to reconstruct a damaged spire. Sometimes survival requires us to question our most basic assumptions. Your people's precision and our adaptability aren't opposing forces. They're complementary tools, each vital in its own way. The High Chancellor agrees, Corvalin said, his crystals showing patterns of cautious optimism. They've proposed creating a permanent joint crisis response team, combining both our approaches. And the Science Council. Even Elder HFY admitted that today's events warrant reevaluation of certain long-held principles. His crystal patterns shifted to show amusement, though I suspect it pained them to say it. As night fell over Avalon, the damaged crystal cities began their slow recovery, their light dimmer than usual but steadily strengthening. Sarah knew that questions about the anomaly's origin remained to be answered, and that not everyone would be comfortable with the rapid changes in human-Centauri relations, but they had faced a crisis that neither species could have survived alone, and emerged stronger for it. "We should get some rest," she said finally. "Tomorrow we'll need to begin analyzing the data from the anomaly. Something tells me this isn't the last surprise space has in store for us." Corvallin's crystals pulsed in agreement. "Indeed. But perhaps that's not such a frightening prospect anymore. After all, we've proven that the unknown doesn't have to be faced alone." As they parted ways, Sarah reflected that this crisis had done more than just forge stronger bonds between their species. It had shown that their differences, rather than being obstacles to overcome, could be the very key to their survival in a universe full of mysteries neither species fully understood. 1 month after the anomaly crisis, the crystalline spires of Avalon bore subtle scars that caught the light differently, imperfections that would have been immediately corrected in the past. But the Centauri had chosen to keep them, marking a profound shift in their cultural mindset. Commander Sarah Chen noticed these changes as she made her way to the newly established Joint Innovation Center, where humans and Centauri now work together daily. The center itself was a testament to change, a hybrid structure combining traditional Centauri crystal architecture with human-designed spaces. The main chamber adapted its configuration throughout the day, shifting between Centauri height and human height sections as needed, while specialized interfaces allowed both species to access and manipulate data in ways that felt natural to them. "The latest results from the anomaly research are fascinating," Corvallin greeted her, his crystal patterns showing the excitement he no longer tried to suppress. "The data suggests it wasn't a natural phenomenon at all." Sarah reviewed the holographic display, noting the complex patterns that had emerged from their analysis. "Artificial. That would explain why it specifically affected both crystalline and organic neural structures." Their discussion was interrupted by the arrival of elder scientist HFY Artelia, accompanied by Dr. Maya Patel, the human quantum physics expert who had recently joined their research team. The sight of the conservative elder willingly working with a human would have been unthinkable just weeks ago. "We've identified similar energy signatures in ancient Centauri records," Artelia announced, their crystals pulsing with scholarly interest. They were dismissed as measurement errors at the time, but Dr. Patel's analysis suggests they might have been early warnings. Maya pulled up her own data sets, the human-designed interface seamlessly integrating with the Centauri systems. "The patterns match artificial quantum fluctuations we've observed in deep space. Someone, or something, might be testing both our species' vulnerabilities." The implications were sobering. Sarah watched as humans and Centauri worked together across the chamber, each bringing their unique perspectives to the challenge. "We need to understand more about these signatures, not just for defense, but to understand who might be creating them and why." High Chancellor Mirkara arrived with Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been working with Centauri security forces to develop integrated defense protocols. The Chancellor's crystal formation showed complex patterns that Sarah had learned to recognize as thoughtful concern. "Your recommendation, Commander Chen?" the Chancellor asked, dispensing with formal protocols. Another significant change in Centauri behavior. "A joint deep space expedition," Sarah proposed. "We combine Centauri long-range vessels with human exploration protocols. Our experience with rapid adaptation, complementing your technological precision." Dangerous, dire Kathos, who had entered behind the Chancellor, commented. But Sarah noticed his crystal patterns showed interest rather than rejection. "Yet perhaps necessary. The anomaly proved we are stronger together than separate." The planning session that followed demonstrated how far both species had come. Humans and Centauri debated openly, neither side dominating the discussion. When conflicts arose, they were handled with a new understanding that different approaches could lead to better solutions. Later that day, Sarah found herself in one of the recovery gardens, where damaged crystals were being helped to regrow. A group of human children from the diplomatic families was there, learning from Centauri crystal shapers about the living technology that powered their civilization. They adapt so quickly, one of the Centauri teachers observed, watching a young girl carefully help guide a crystal's growth pattern. Without the weight of centuries of tradition, they see possibilities we might have overlooked. And learn precision from your example, Sarah added, noting how carefully the children followed the Centauri's guidance. It's not about erasing our differences, but understanding how they make us stronger together. The garden session was interrupted by an alert from the research center. Sarah and the teacher hurried back, finding the main chamber alive with activity. Maya and Corvalin had discovered something in the deep space data. "We've detected another anomaly forming," Maya announced, her fingers dancing over the interface. "But this time, we understand its patterns. We can predict its behavior." Corvalin's crystals pulsed with excitement. "More than that, we might be able to communicate through it. The quantum signatures suggest it could be a form of faster-than-light communication." The implications were enormous. If they could understand and control these anomalies, it could revolutionize interstellar travel and communication. But more importantly, it might help them understand whoever was creating them. High Chancellor Mir Kara called an emergency session of the Joint Council, another new institution born from the crisis. As humans and Centauri gathered to discuss this development, Sarah noticed how naturally they had begun to accommodate each other's needs and communication styles. "We stand at a threshold," the Chancellor addressed the Assembly. "What began as a crisis has led us to an opportunity, but seizing it will require us to commit fully to this partnership we've begun to build." The debate that followed was passionate but productive. Humans offered bold proposals while Centauri suggested careful refinements. When they finally reached a decision, it was one that would have been impossible just months ago. A joint fleet would be assembled, crewed by both species, to investigate the source of the anomalies. As the meeting concluded, Sarah found herself walking with Corvalin through one of the hybrid corridors that connected different sections of the complex. "Did you ever imagine we'd come this far?" she asked. "Never," he admitted, his crystals showing amusement. "Our historical records suggested it would take decades to achieve this level of integration. But then, our historical records didn't account for human adaptability. Or Centauri willingness to change," Sarah added. "Your people could have retreated behind their traditions after the crisis. Instead, you chose to embrace new possibilities." They reached a viewport overlooking the city. The evening light caught the scared crystal spires, creating new patterns of refraction that turned the imperfections into things of beauty. "The fleet will launch next month," Corvalin said. "The conservative factions are still nervous about sending mixed crews into deep space." "They should be," Sarah smiled. "We're about to venture into unknown territory, facing whoever or whatever created those anomalies. But that's what explorers do. We face the unknown together, each bringing our own strengths to the challenge." As they watched the sun set over Avalon, casting rainbow refractions through the crystal cities, Sarah reflected on how far they'd come. The crisis had forced both species to confront their preconceptions and fears, but what had emerged was something neither side could have predicted: a genuine partnership based on mutual respect and understanding. The next phase of their journey would take them into the depths of space, seeking answers to questions neither species could answer alone. But they would face those challenges together, their differences no longer barriers but bridges to a future neither had imagined possible. The launch day arrived with a sense of historic significance that even the most stoic Centauri couldn't ignore. The joint exploration fleet hung in high orbit above Avalon, 5 vessels that represented the pinnacle of both human and Centauri engineering. Commander Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the flagship Unity, a hybrid vessel that combined Centauri crystalline technology with human adaptive systems. Final systems check complete, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported from his station, working seamlessly alongside his Centauri counterpart. All ships report ready for quantum fold initiation. The bridge crew was a careful mix of both species, each chosen not just for their technical skills, but for their ability to work across cultural boundaries. Corvalin, now serving as Chief Science Officer, monitored the complex array of sensors they'd developed to track the anomalies. "The quantum signatures are stable," he announced, his crystals pulsing with controlled excitement. "We've mapped a clear path to the source." Sarah took a moment to absorb the significance of this moment. Just months ago, humans and Centauri had been suspicious allies at best. Now they were about to venture into unknown space together, seeking answers to a mystery that affected both their species. High Chancellor Mirkara's image appeared on the main view screen, their crystal formations reflecting the gravity of the moment. "Commander Chen, you carry with you not just the hopes of both our peoples, but proof that different species can achieve more together than apart. May your journey bring understanding." As final launch preparations continued, Sarah recalled the intense debates that had led to this moment. The conservative factions on both sides had argued against such deep integration between the species, but the success of their joint projects, especially the breakthrough in controlling smaller versions of the anomaly for communication, had proven the value of their partnership. "All ships, this is Commander Chen," she broadcast to the fleet. "Quantum fold drives online. Begin synchronization sequence." The next few moments demonstrated the perfect balance they'd achieved between human intuition and Centauri precision. The crystalline cores of their ships pulsed in harmony, creating a quantum resonance field that would allow them to traverse the vast distances of space in ways neither species had achieved alone. As the fleet prepared to make its first jump, alarms suddenly blared across all 5 ships. Multiple anomalies forming. Corvalin called out, his crystals flashing with urgent patterns. "They're different from the previous ones, more controlled, more focused." Before anyone could react, space itself seemed to fold around them. When reality stabilized, they found themselves in an unknown region of space, surrounded by structures that defied comprehension. Massive crystalline formations that seemed both organic and artificial, pulsing with energy patterns that reminded Sarah of both Centauri biology and human neural networks. "We're receiving a transmission," Rodriguez reported, his voice tight with tension. "It's using both our communication protocols simultaneously." The message that came through was unlike anything they'd encountered before. It spoke in patterns of light and energy that the Centauri could read in their crystal structures, while simultaneously conveying information in ways that resonated with human neural patterns. It wasn't just communication, it was communion. They learned they had been brought before the architects, an ancient species that had seeded the galaxy with different forms of intelligent life, including both humans and Centauri. The anomalies had been tests, carefully calibrated to force their species to work together, to prove they were ready for the next step in galactic evolution. "Your partnership is unique," the architects communicated. "Throughout the galaxy, we have watched species destroy each other over their differences, but you have learned to combine them, to create something greater than the sum of your parts." As the architects shared their knowledge, Sarah and her crew began to understand the true scope of what they'd achieved. Their hybrid technology, born from crisis and cooperation, had opened doors neither species could have approached alone. The very differences that had once divided them had become the key to unlocking secrets of the universe. Hours stretched into days as they learned from the architects, each revelation leading to new understanding. The architects showed them how to fully merge their technologies, how to create ships and cities that could truly serve both species, and how to expand their communication to levels they had never imagined possible. But the greatest gift was the invitation to join a hidden network of species across the galaxy who had passed similar tests, who had learned to transcend their differences and work together. They would not be given this knowledge freely. They would have to work for it, to prove again and again that their partnership could withstand the challenges ahead. As they prepared to return home with their newfound knowledge and responsibility, Sarah found Corvalin in the ship's observation lounge, his crystals reflecting the strange light of this distant sector of space. "When I first met you," he said, "I thought humans were fascinating but primitive. Now I understand that what I saw as primitive was actually potential, the ability to adapt, to change, to see possibilities where we saw only chaos." Sarah smiled. "And we thought the Centauri were rigid and unchanging." We didn't understand that your precision and tradition could anchor our creativity, give it direction and purpose. The journey home was not just a return trip, but the beginning of a new era. The fleet had left as an experiment in cooperation. It would return as proof that the future belonged to those who could bridge not just space, but understanding. Avalon's crystal spires came into view, their familiar light a welcome sight after the wonders they'd witnessed. But they were no longer just Centauri cities. Work had already begun to create spaces where both species could truly live together, each contributing their unique perspectives to create something entirely new. As the fleet moved into orbit, Sarah addressed both her crew and the waiting populations below. We left seeking answers about the anomalies. We return with something far greater, a vision of what we can become together. The architects showed us possibilities, but it's up to us to make them real. Our differences aren't obstacles to overcome. They're the very things that make us strong. The High Chancellor's response reflected the profound change that had come over both societies. Then let us begin this new chapter together, not as separate species learning to cooperate, but as partners in exploring a universe that has proven far more wonderful and mysterious than either of us imagined alone. As celebrations began on the surface below, Sarah watched humans and Centauri working together across her bridge, no longer conscious of their differences, but simply focused on their shared purpose. The architects had chosen well, not because either species was perfect, but because together they had learned to be better than they could have been alone. The stars beckoned, full of new mysteries to solve and challenges to face, but they would face them together, their differences not divided but multiplied, creating possibilities that neither species could have imagined in their separate paths. The future was uncertain, but that uncertainty no longer brought fear, only anticipation of what they would discover next, together.